So this is the third week of the month, which technically speaking means we ought to be doing a Dharma discussion tonight, but the whole calendar is so cockeyed for the whole month and everything's all messed around. And I felt recent events kind of compelled me to feel like I should talk about something tonight, something that's kind of timely, and I didn't want to put it off until the new year in this case. You may have heard that the poet Nikki Giovanni died recently. She died on December the 9th. She was a very important American poet. She was one of the founders of the Black Arts movement of the 1960s and 70s. In the days after, a couple of days after her death, there were a lot of poems getting shared online. I saw a lot of people circulating poems of hers online, and there was one that I saw I'd never seen before. I wasn't familiar with it, and it hit me kind of viscerally. I connected to it really strongly. The poem is entitled Allowables. I killed a spider, not a murderous brown recluse, nor even a black widow, and if the truth were told, this was only a small sort of papery spider who should have run when I picked up the book. But she didn't. And she scared me, and I smashed her. I don't think I'm allowed to kill something because I am frightened. I suspect the reason this poem resonated with me so much is because I have taken life on my mind recently, which I know sounds a little bit odd, but we have two fellows here who are preparing to do what we call taking the precepts to formally become Buddhists in the spring, and part of that process is a series of 6 monthly classes, and we start with the first one on what it means to take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and then there's one on each of the 5 precepts, and the session on not taking life is tomorrow night. So I've been thinking about that a good bit, kind of in preparation for that class with those two guys. When I saw Giovanni's poem, it immediately reminded me of another poem. There's a haiku by the Japanese poet Kobayashi Issa. He lived at the end of the 18th, beginning of the 19th century. He was a priest. He was a Buddhist priest of the Jodo Shinshu sect. That's one of those single practice traditions that I talked about. I did a talk a while back on Pure Land Buddhism, the Pure Land tradition, and Jodo Shinshu is one of those traditions in Japan that's very squarely in that Pure Land tradition. But what Issa is more well known for today is as a very prolific writer of haiku. He's considered one of the 4 great haiku masters of Japan. And this is one of Issa's better known haiku. All the time I pray to Buddha, I keep on killing mosquitoes. Now, as you probably know, a traditional haiku always has some sort of connection to the natural world. There's always some sort of connection to nature in it. Clearly, mosquitoes were a part of nature that Issa thought about a lot. He wrote about 20,000 haiku that, well, we still have about 20,000 haiku that we know that he wrote. Over 150 of them were about mosquitoes, so clearly mosquitoes were something that he thought about at least a little bit. This poem reminds me of an experience that I had at Sanamsa. That's the name of the training monastery for the Taego order in South Korea. I'd gone there to undergo kind of the final training and preparation to be ordained as a monk. Something that I realized pretty quickly was not actually the right thing for me to do, and so I didn't actually go through that ordination process, but I spent some time at Sanamsa. The trainees there were divided into work teams. My team's first assignment was working in the kitchen. Now, nobody on my team spoke any English, and my Korean was horrible. So my ability to get to know these other men was really, really limited. There was one of these men, one of the younger ones. There's really only two things I remember about him. One of them was that, I'm not quite sure why, but again, we were working in the kitchen, and he got assigned the job of prepping the kimchi, pickled spiced cabbage, right, for our meals, which we ate 3 times a day. And rather than just having like a bowl of, you scoop kimchi out of the pot, and you have like a bowl of kimchi, then people take out of it. Instead, I'm not sure why they do it this way, but he would take kimchi leaves out of the pot and he would pile them up very neatly, and he would cut them into these perfect squares and pile them up in these very tidy piles on plates to then get passed through the room as we were passing out the food for the meals. And then he ate all the little scrappy bits from around the edges that he drew all the trimmings. The only other thing I remember about this guy happened in the dining hall. We were sitting on the floor in tidy little columns, waiting for something to start. I know it wasn't a meal, but we used the dining hall for all sorts of things. It was a lecture or something that was about to happen. I mean, we even slept in the dining hall, so almost everything happened in the dining hall. But we were there for some reason. We were waiting, and the other men were sort of serendipitously chatting before the monks came in to kind of start whatever it is we were about to do. And suddenly this one young guy, he reached his hands out and clapped and squashed a mosquito. And I clearly got, not intentionally, but I must have gotten a really surprised look on my face because to see him do that, because when he noticed me, I realized that he'd noticed me and whatever my reaction had been. And he closed his eyes and kind of put his hands like this and like played at like praying for the mosquito that he just killed for a second before he kind of laughed it off after that. To really understand this story, there's something you kind of need to know, I think, about the situation there. There were 32 rules. Listen carefully. There were 32 rules that the trainees, the hengja, were supposed to follow. Every morning, they would recite these rules to us. People were taking turns reading these rules out loud, so everybody in the group got a daily reminder of what the rules were. I have no idea what they were because it was in Korean, and no one ever explained them to me, and no one ever gave them to me in English. So the only rule that I know was only shave your head on Saturdays, because I know it. That one's a rule because I broke that one because I didn't know it was a rule. So that's the only one that I actually know. I'm pretty sure, though, that following the 5 precepts was among the rules, right? That we were supposed to be following the 5 precepts. And the first of the 5 precepts is not taking life. Panatipata Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. In Pali, that's I undertake the precept to refrain from destroying living creatures. That's the first precept. Now, here's the way the Buddha explains the first precept in the Abhisanda Sutta, which is part of the Anguttara Nikaya of the Pali Canon, one of those big fat books on the shelf up there. Now, there are these 5 gifts, 5 great gifts. Original, long-standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated from the beginning, that are not open to suspicion, will never be open to suspicion, and are unfaulted by knowledgeable contemplatives and Brahmins. Which 5? There is the case where a disciple of the noble ones, abandoning the taking of life, abstains from taking life. In doing so, he gives freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings. In giving freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings, he gains a share in limitless freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, and freedom from oppression. It's also important to keep in mind, and as some of you probably remember, that in the Buddhist understanding of ethics, it's the intention behind an action that determines its morality, not the action, not the consequences of the action, the intention behind the action. So if you understand it in that context, making a conscious decision to kill something, planning to do it, and then failing to do it is actually morally worse than killing something without intention, killing something by accident, for example. A couple of years ago, I was up mowing my lawn. I stopped for a second. I don't remember why. I pick up a stick or something. Had some reason I stopped pushing the mower for a second. And while the mower was stationary, a little moth came and landed in the grass right in front of the lawnmower. It kind of started flopping around in the grass. Now, if it had landed a second later, I was just about to start pushing the mower again. If it had landed a second later, I would have run over it unintentionally, and I probably would have killed it. Right? And who knows, in the process of mowing my yard, how many bugs I killed, right? And with the mower, with my feet, worms, bugs, who knows? Now, as it happened, however, at the moment, had I started pushing the mower, I would have made a conscious decision to run over the moth on purpose. But I didn't. I saw the moth. I stopped. I thought about it. I'm like, okay, I can get that out of the way. I kind of scooped the moth out to the side and kept mowing. When people think about taking life, they tend to focus on the big ticket items, understandably, where people are involved. Murder, war, stuff like that. The debate around abortion is obviously relevant. That's definitely a topic for another day. We're not going to get into that tonight. Meat eating. That's an issue where a lot of ink's been spilled, where a lot of different traditions have very different perspectives on it. Eating's a context that shows kind of the complex ramifications of the first precept. Human beings are animals. We're animals, right? We have to eat other living things in order to stay alive ourselves. Even if we limit ourselves to just eating plants under the, sort of the rationalization that it's okay to take non-sentient life, right? We can't ignore the fact that sentient life is taken in the process of the planting and the protecting of the plants and the harvesting of the plants and the transporting of the plants, right? Some of you have heard me share my favorite short meal prayer. Remembering that we live at the expense of other life, may we be worthy of the sacrifice. Because every time we eat, something is being sacrificed. Even actions like washing our hands, taking an antibiotic when we have a bacterial infection, technically that involves intentionally taking life. Even though obviously these are necessary to protect our own lives, but technically speaking, we're killing bacteria when we do those things. But the kind of life-taking that Giovanni and Isa are describing in their poems is a little more brutish even than killing for food, if you think about it. As the first poem mentioned, some spiders are dangerous to people. But when they bite people, it's defensive. They never want to hurt us. It's not like spiders are trying to eat us, right? It doesn't work that way. Obviously, some mosquitoes in some parts of the world are dangerous, vectors for diseases, malaria, viral infections, stuff like that. There are even diseases associated with some moths, which I didn't even know was possible until I started looking it up this week. I thought, surely moths can't communicate diseases. Well, actually, it turns out that they can, which I didn't even know. Incredibly rare. It's incredibly rare, but it's possible. But most of the time, killing of those kinds of creatures is just kind of mindless. People don't even really think about it. It's just sort of a reflex. It's just sort of something that doesn't even rise to the level of a lot of conscious thought. There isn't a lot of conscious thought behind it. To kill something that is in fact no threat to us at all, just because it's bothersome, just because it's creepy and freaks us out a little bit maybe, or just because it's kind of culturally ingrained in us to do it because it's what we've always seen people do, those aren't really very good justifications for killing something. Every month on the full moon day, in the morning of full moon day, part of my personal morning practice includes reading the section of the Brahma's Net Sutra that includes the 10 bodhisattva precepts. The lay folks here who've taken the precepts took the 5 lay precepts, but when I was ordained as a Dharma teacher, I took the 10 bodhisattva precepts, which start with the same 5, but then have 5 extra things. The text about the first precept about not taking life in that sutra, in the Brahmacnet Sutra, emphasizes that the enjoyment of killing, taking pleasure at killing, is especially heinous. All life-taking should be seen as unfortunate and regrettable and as kind of a last resort when there's no better alternative. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that we should put some deliberate thought into examining our relationships to other living beings, our intentions, and consider what our responsibilities are concerning the well-being of other living things. Sambhala Shipshio, may you, I, and all beings manifest enlightenment.